And I think it looks a lot better. Don't you, Dad?
Oh, absolutely.
And when they don't respect it, trouble ensues. Any danger that it poses to humans or animals?
According to the app, harmful to animals and harmful to humans. Man, this weather's nice.
Isn't it great? Probably here. It's dry. That's good.
It's pretty easy to roll. It should be.
Oh yeah, that's fine. The time I've spent untangling things,
Yes.
I mean, if I could go back through my life,
Add up the minutes.
add up all the minutes and hours I've spent, it would be like months that I've spent.
I was going to say days, but maybe months. And this seems to be in pretty good shape.
It is. So I am coming in from an angle, which I don't really have a choice.
Right.
Is
Yeah,
that
as long as you get a good bite. I always like to countersink them just a little bit.
okay?
Yeah, that's in there for sure.
We can look at him from a distance.
I want to look at that spider from it. You see that spider, bud?
Come here, have your sausage. Have your sausage. Okay, there you go.
Look at this thing. You know, that little extra step doesn't really bug me,
You don't think
but I
it's
still.
too
Is it just a
noticeable?
drop off?
Well, yeah. So to make it level, the bottom step now needs to be maybe 1.5 inches higher than it used to be.
Okay.
So this is an 8-inch step. This is an 8-inch step.
Hey Henry, we got
This is an 8-inch step. But right here, it's a 10-inch step.
Okay, so,
So-
it'll just catch you off guard if you're not.
Yes.
If you just buy a couple of pavers for
And put
right
some pavers
on the
down.
landing right here. In fact, you could just pave it out all the way to the, and that way you wouldn't even really notice it.
Well, the
'Cause
thing
the
is,
paver is about 1.5 inches.
we're eventually wanting to do something with this area anyways.
Mhm.
Whether it's new mulch or what, we're not quite sure. But
Right.
Well, the pavers could help.
that's a lot better, man. They can help, but just this experience. This is a much better stair experience than.
Well, I would hope so. The last stairs were garbage.
What's this stuff, Dad?
Just basic indoor, outdoor, sealant, not sealant, but paint.
Which we're gonna put on the bottom of this footer.
Yeah, since we cut it, this is just a set of thirsty straws down here
Yep.
on the bottom. So seal that
Before
off
we put that
on the
in
paver.
its final resting place on that paver.
Right in the corner there. Yep,
Perfect.
that's good. It's 118 and 7/8.
118 and 7/8.
Yeah.
Okay. You looked it up, Dad. What type of spider is that?
Yellow garden spider.
And any danger that it poses to humans or animals?
According to the app, harmful to animals and harmful to humans. So
What recommend relocating?
that's what it recommended.
Which will probably, where you at, buddy? Where you are? Which we'll probably do. I've never seen that spider before.
Yeah, a lot of neat markings on it.
Yeah, it is cool. Praying that they're not gonna strip.
may be another one down there on that far end.
Oh, there is, yeah. So the first few years that we lived here, we were often out on this deck every night, eating, hanging out, doing stuff. But over the years, we just kind of stopped hanging out here, and the deck kind of went into neglect. So Holly and I thought it would be a good idea, number one, to change these stairs, because they were in rough shape. They were warping and they were sagging, and it was bouncing every time you stepped on the stairs, and there's nails sticking out of them. Just not a really safe environment for us, let alone our toddler. The corner was bouncing because that post under there was rotted away. So every time we stepped on this corner of the deck, it would bounce. And then there were a few boards that were warped and holding up. So we decided to take care of that corner, take care of the stairs, and take care of some of those boards that were warped up. And I think it looks a lot better. Don't you, Dad?
Oh, absolutely. And
Safer?
right, I think that's the biggest thing. But you're talking about in a week or so, maybe buying some stain.
Yes, that's the next step, is we're going to get some stain. We still have yet to decide what kind, and we're going to stain it up. Probably a opaque stain paint like you have, Dad.
Right, yeah. It'll last you for quite a while.
Yeah, so I think that's the next step, but phase one of the deck restoration is complete, and I like it a lot better. Well, it's not technically fall or autumn, but it's certainly close. You can feel it in the wind. You can smell it. You can sense it. The temperatures have been dropping down to the high 40s at night, like 47, 48 degrees Fahrenheit. I guess in Celsius, that's like 7 or 8 degrees Celsius, which is nice and chilly. It's a good, chilly fall, crisp weather. And during the day, there's been a few days here where it's been in the 60s. Right now it's in the 60s Fahrenheit. And so fall is definitely my favorite season. All the leaves are falling, but it also means time to start thinking long term about what we're going to do post-winter. This fall, we typically will clean up the garden, we'll process animals. We've already processed our breast chickens. We're going to be processing turkeys next. And so there's one particular subject. You hear a bell? Yeah, I hear that bell too. There's one subject in particular that has been top of mind for Holly and I as we think about what animals we get in the future. And that's fencing. There are two primary types of fencing when you're doing small farm work. And the first type is the kind that we're very familiar with, and that's temporary fencing. That can take the form of netting, like you see here, that we have for the poultry that's not lit, and we very rarely light it up anymore. or something like strand wire fencing, which you can also light up. It's easy to move around. You can create paddocks with it. It's generally great for small animals like turkeys and chickens, poultry, things like that. But we also used it for our pigs. We still have plenty of pig fencing that was just netting that we used for Frankenbeans when we had them down in the woods. And it was pretty good for what it was. The thing to note about this temporary fencing, this temporary netting, is that this really isn't a physical barrier. This is a psychological barrier. The idea is to train animals on a charged fence, so when they touch it with their snouts or their feathers or whatever, they get that jolt and then they respect it. That's true for this type of fencing, this netting, and it's also true for this strand fencing. But it's not a physical barrier. They could easily walk through this, especially larger animals. They can work their way around, over, or through this fencing. It's not a physical barrier. It's a barrier of respect, really. They learn to respect the fence. And when they don't respect it, trouble ensues. We ran into that issue with Frankenbeans, our pigs, when they had escaped it a few times because they were panicked or whatever. We had netting around, electric netting, and for whatever reason, they freaked out in the middle of the night, and they bust through the electric netting, not caring whether or not they got shocked. Now, if the first type of fencing is temporary, then it would stand to reason that the second type of fencing is permanent fencing, and obviously that can take many forms. Chain link, solid wall fencing, barbed wire fencing, woven wire fencing. As you can see here, of our 11 acres, I would say most of it, 80% of it, has this barrier of 3 strands of barbed wire. And that covers most, especially around the woods, around the entrance, around the front of our property where it faces the road. It's mostly in pretty poor shape. As you see here, if I were to bulk up this permanent fence, I'd probably need to buy a lot of T-posts and some barbed wire strands. We do have a lot of barbed wire strand currently and some T-posts, but it would be a reasonable investment to try and get some more of this to bulk up our current permanent boundary fence, or perimeter fence, I guess you could say, around the property. Given our experience with the pigs, one of the very first things I thought about as we prepare for potentially new animals, and thinking a lot about sheep lately, is electric netting, is temporary electric fencing, is it enough, or do we need to bulk up our perimeter fence? That leads to a second question. If we do bulk up our perimeter fence, is barbed wire enough? You think about sheep. Would they respect this? Obviously, this would need to be fixed up and managed better. More T-posts, probably new strands. But would this be enough to stop a sheep, or would they not respect it? I tend to think that they wouldn't respect it. I've spent some time out at the Kramers talking about their sheep operation, and I'd like to spend more time chatting with them about it, and maybe next time they're out here, kind of get Nate and Katie's thoughts on the idea of sheep. First of all, is this front pasture enough? 2 acres or so for 2 or 3 sheep? I tend to think it would be if they're rotated enough. If their individual paddocks are rotated enough, I think this would be a good amount. Maybe walk it around the back of the house and into the back pasture potentially. But the real question that I have, would temporary fencing be enough? You have horror stories of sheep getting out and running into the road, injuring people, getting killed themselves. If I do have to build a perimeter fence or bulk up my perimeter fence, would barbed wire be enough, or do I need to get into something more substantial, like a woven wire fence or even a full-on fence? Those are questions that we're thinking about right now. If a sheep escapes the temporary electric fencing of their padding, or of their paddock, okay, that probably happens a fair amount of time, but where are they going to go after that? If there's solid perimeter fencing around the entirety of the homestead, I would certainly sleep better at night. But again, is that necessary? And if so, what kind of perimeter fencing? Of course, what we find out about fencing and what actions we need to take to get it up to snuff, if any actions are needed, will definitely determine a lot of the activities we take on over the upcoming cooler months. We'll see, and it's something that will require a lot of research. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with us, guys. I gotta chase down this little toddler. More work is on the way. I think we're gonna have a special guest visit us next week to take a look at some interior work on a house that we're thinking about doing. So stay tuned for that. But until then, remember, as always, slowly, slowly.